Good evening, everyone. Boy, what a frustrating day. I started off this morning by doing the final edit on this video and uploading it, and my software craps out. I didn't know that you need to update your software. I'm not tech savvy, I just push buttons. So I figured before I got triggered, I'm going to go outside and do things that I need to do and enjoy the beautiful spring weather that we're getting. The sun's been shining for about a week. The snow's melting like crazy. The frost is coming out of the ground. The frost is actually out of the garden area. And now I'm bringing the heat of the soil up to where I can plant my root vegetables and get the carrots and beets and all that stuff started. Now to protect it at night, I'm covering it with vapor barrier. So anyway, in this video here, I'm just going to ramble on some thoughts that I've had and some experiences I've had starting an organic base for my garden. Now, when I first moved out here several years ago, my soil was crap. It was flour, it was powdery, it was so acidic, nothing would grow. My first garden was 10 by 10, and even the radishes were having a hard time. They were woody, they were tiny. The rest of my seedlings, like the lettuce and all that stuff, got to, minimal height, and they just died. There was nothing for them to grow on, to live on. So the thoughts that I've had for this video, some of it might be things that we all already know, but I'm going to touch on them all to give us all a refresher. So plants, as we know, need carbon dioxide to grow. They need water. They need ultraviolet sun, or ultraviolet light, the perfect light spectrum from sunlight that starts the combustion inside the plant, which enables it to form molecules into sugar or glucose. Now, the DNA structure of the plant that controls the cells and all that stuff, those take the glucose and form cellulose, which is the little building blocks of the plant, the thing that makes the leaves a certain length, the plant a certain height, etc., etc. Now I'm going to take that thought and put it over here on this burner. We all know that plants need a rich, loose, moist soil to grow efficiently. Now, you have this expert over here on this video saying, don't till. You got this expert over here saying, oh, you have to till. Now, I've done my garden both ways. I started off by tilling, adding in my compost and all that stuff. And then in the fall, tilling it again. In the spring, tilling it again. I did not realize the damage I was doing until I started layering my compost and mulch on top of my tillage. We're going to break that tillage into two layers, your top layer and your bottom layer. What's happening on your bottom layer is a protected environment where colonies of microbacteria are growing and spreading out and breaking out in the nutrients and depositing those where the roots of the plant can reach down and grab those. Now with tilling, what we're doing, or what I was doing, was taking all those microcolonies and exposing them to ultraviolet, more intense heat, less humidity, an unstable environment. So initially I'm killing everything that my garden needs to grow. So now that I'm like the difference between what I tilled and what I layered in compost, there wasn't even a comparison. The tilled area of the garden didn't produce nearly the same as the area that I didn't till and layered. Same plants, same tomatoes, same lettuce, out of the same packet of seeds. This stuff had a hard time. It tasted bitter. This stuff was all rich and sweet and delicious, nutrient-packed food. So we don't want to turn the soil. We don't want to till that. Now we're going to jump over to compost. I'm sure some of you, when you've turned your compost, there's a layer in there that's usually near the hottest part of the compost, and it's a brown or greenish, sludgy, disgusting, smelly layer in there. That's your bad bacteria. And that will overtake your good bacteria. And how we kill that is by turning the compost and exposing it to the ultraviolet, letting that heat out and exposing it to oxygen. Now we are killing good bacteria too, but there's a way to protect that with biochar, and I'm going to get into that. So now that we're killing off that bad bacteria, we're exposing oxygen into the compost, and so it can break down, form those nitrogen pockets and all that stuff for the good bacteria to grow. So biochar, think of it as a tiny little apartment building think of a honeycomb. You have all that surface space within each comb, and the microbacteria colonize throughout that whole piece of biochar. When it's evenly baked all the way through, that cellulose crystalline carbon structure is left behind, forming all those combs, and that's what your microbacteria colonize in. Now, so many videos out there saying to crush this into a powder. Don't do it. What you're doing is you're taking an established colony growing in this piece of biochar and you're spreading it out. Microbacteria colonies work better the bigger they are. They work more effectively together to break down larger chunks of those nutrients. Each species of microbacteria has a different job to leave deposits of certain elements that we need for certain vegetables to grow. If all those elements are there, you should have a successful garden everywhere. The plants, we're generally speaking now, your tomatoes are going to pull out certain nutrients that it needs, potassiums and all that stuff. It's designed to pull the nutrients it needs out of the soil. And if you have an overall rich garden, all your vegetables, generally speaking, should do awesomely. So now, back to the biochar. You cannot, when you're making this, you cannot expose this to oxygen. It has to burn without oxygen so that it doesn't burn as hot, breaking down that cellulose structure, those little tiny microscopic combs. I'm going to explain in the next video a couple different ways. We're actually going to build a couple different biochar, a small one for the fireplace and a larger one where we can mass produce this stuff. Now, biochar that you buy in the store, there are some good products, but a lot of the biochar that you buy in the store and you find out on the label, because usually they brag about it, a lot of it is from wooden pallets, recycled product. Now, a lot of pallets, for shipping regulations, the product that is shipped in on those pallets is sprayed with a fire retardant to meet certain import laws. That's saturated in the wood. You think of other chemicals that have spilled onto that wood. And now we're going to make biochar of it and put it in the garden? I don't think so. Now, like I said, not all of them are like that. Some other biochar, if you look on the label, it'll say sterilized. We don't want sterilized. How can you have sterilized and activated charcoal? How do you put that in the same sentence? Because what you're doing when you're sterilizing is you're killing the microbacteria. Now, activated charcoal. How do we do that? I do it by putting biochar, these chunks of biochar, in my chicken coop. Now, the chickens have a more nitrogen-rich manure, and a particular microbacteria will grow in that biochar. The stuff that I put in the goat pen next to their feeder where they're dropping and wasting stalks and stuff like that, that's going to be another kind of microbacteria. I put it underneath the rabbit cages and it collects urine, which is full of bacteria. Bacteria from their manure. That's another species. We mix all that into our compost now when I clean out the pens and all that. And I've got all these colonies spread throughout my compost of all the different kinds of microbacteria that I need in my garden. This by itself is no good in the garden. This doesn't do a thing. There's no nutrients in here. It's all burnt out. This is just an apartment building for the microbacteria. and we need to activate that. Now you can get chemicals or nutrients artificially separated. You can buy those from your garden store, and we can use those to charge the charcoal, but I don't like doing that. It's not a natural process. Why not let the manure and nature do it naturally? And it's so fast. It's only a few days, and this will start filling up. From there, it expands, and it goes into the next piece of charcoal or a piece of straw where it's protected in a little environment. Then when we take that compost and we put it in the garden, we have all those colonies ready to go to work. And as those colonies spread through your tillage, up, down, out, we don't need to till, because as it expands, it fills up that whole tillage layer with the goodness and the nutrient deposits from the mycobacteria. You following me? So we don't need to till. We're going to feed those mycobacteria because now they have expanded up to the surface or grown up to the surface. We're going to feed that with another layer of compost, protect it with another layer of mulch. And that mycobacteria is just going to keep growing and make your soil darker and richer throughout your whole garden. So now living organisms, all things considered, are pretty resilient. And we're talking about plants here specifically. Now, when we artificially introduce nutrients and chemicals and stuff like that, yes, the plant is going to absorb whatever, whenever it can, and it's going to do the best job it can. But now, because of the the simulated environment in that vegetable or fruit, microbacteria can't flourish in our gut system, in our digestive system, and in our bodies because it's an artificial environment. Now we're eating sterile vegetables, I'm going to call them, or synthetic vegetables. When we absorb that into our bodies, the microbacteria cannot function. They cannot digest the sugars that we consume. Leaves us with fatty deposits. It leaves us with the inability for those microbacteria to flush out damaged cells, to consume those, to get rid of viruses and all that other stuff. And it comes from the crappy food that we eat. The simple solution to this is creating an environment for those microbacteria to flourish and be carried through into our bodies, where our bodies can be cleaned out on a regular basis so we can stay healthy. So needless to say, without microbacteria, we can't survive. Our plants can't survive. Our gardens don't grow efficiently. This is why the earth is falling apart, is because we don't have the microbacteria holding the earth together and absorbing the nutrients and pushing them back down into the ground so us and animals can absorb those into our bodies and become healthy and live longer and disease-free, and etc., etc. So how do we fix the earth? Honestly, heal it with microbacteria. So like I said on the next video, we're going to build a couple of biochar units. I'm still working on the video for that. And I'm going to get that published as soon as possible, get it posted for you guys. And until then, have a good day, and we'll see you in the garden.